Munich and to the fifth Doc Forum here in the University for Television and Film Munich. It's a great pleasure for me to say hello to all of you, especially to our guests who are coming via Documentary Campus and Creative Europe Desk Munich. And I would like to introduce you to Donata von Perfall.
Thank you, Sebastian. For me, it's a big pleasure to be here, especially because Munich is the hometown of Documentary Campus, where we still have our main office and where we've been founded. And we were just talking, that was like 15 years ago in the Film Centrum, and where we had the Master School, which is still the core of our business, the Documentary Campus Master School, where we train up to 15 filmmakers with a project for the international market. And since then, so much has happened, and we have programs in Asia and the MENA regions, and we're just opening up a new program in Latin America. So traveling around and do fantastic sessions with partners, such as festivals, and especially with partners we are very close to emotionally, like the DocFest Munich and the Doc Forum. So thanks, Sebastian, for inviting us. And thanks to Ingeborg Degener, you should come next to me on the stage, because without Creative Europe, we could not work, our main supporter. And Ingeborg is one of those persons at the desks, well, Europe-wide, who has the strongest heart on documentaries and supports us all the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donata, and thank you, Sebastian. I think by now you've understood. Huh? This is going to go on like this. You know, everybody says 3 sentences, and then we call somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else, and in the end you go home. Yeah, just a brief explanation on what Creative Europe is. It's the support program of the European Union based in Brussels, and it's called Creative Europe now. It used to be called the Media Program, and Creative Europe is, in fact, the former Media Program plus the former support program for culture. And here in Munich, we have a Creative Europe desk. That's me and my colleague Eva, who's in Stuttgart at another festival today. So if you would like to find out about European support for development of a documentary or of a narrative game or of a web doc or a festival, something like that, or if you would like to find out about which markets and festivals to attend with your film, well, there's always Donata, who knows more than anybody else, but if she happens to be in Berlin, why don't you come to see us? We're based in Sonnenstraße with the FFF, the Bavarian Film Fund. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, but you should stay with me now. And now speaking for the Master School and Documentary Campus, we could not survive as well without the support of the, now I have to read that because you're so new, Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs, Media, Energy and Technology, which we were formerly with the Bavarian State Cancellery. And Mr. Roppelt, who is a very strong supporter of our initiative and always supports filmmakers into the Master School, but also open training sessions like today. And I'd like to welcome, on behalf of him, Mr. Arne Kuder, who says a couple of welcoming words. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. On behalf of the ministry, well, welcome, and welcome by Mr. Roppelt too, who can't come, unfortunately. I'm not going to bore you with a civil servant's perspective on documentary movies or virtual reality. I am going to bore you, however, with a few words on Bavaria as a media location and why we choose to cooperate with Documentary Campus. Now, if you do look at Bavaria and if you do look at the film and creative scene, you will find it's a bit of a keystone to Bavarian cultural identity and Bavarian economy. Actually, Munich appears to be the hub of it all. A recent study basically found out that Munich is the hotspot and the top location in Germany for movie productions. And while you might say I'm obliged to say that, speaking for the ministry, we'd like to keep it that way. And if you look at the reasons for that, you will find important stakeholders, all the big players sitting here, potential customers for movie producers, and you see you have great production conditions. But the most important point is we have the talents and we have the institutions to train them, and this is where Documentary Campus comes into play, providing basically a tailor-made program in an international environment and providing all the cross-media education that you need in these ever-so-changing times. And this is where I come back to this event and why we chose to support this event. If you look at virtual reality technology, it appears to be the next big thing, or at least it looks like that. And if you look at Google purchasing Magic Leap, and if you look at Facebook buying Oculus Rift for billions of dollars, it looks like going to have some insights in a very, very interesting area. And that's it for me, basically. I say thank you very much for coming and have a great day.
Thank you so much for this great speech. Before we now head into the day, I'd like to introduce to you Dorothea Schiebel from my team. She's not just running the Munich office, but she also organized this whole event. Basically, she's the face behind the event. Dorothea, you have to stand up. And now I'm very happy to hand over to our host of the day, James Pallot. And now you ask probably, he looks so male. Where is Nonny? Nonny de la Peña, unfortunately, and those of you who have been joining the Republica know about that already. She's unfortunately sick in Los Angeles. She couldn't fly here. But James is not just the co-founder of Emblematic Group and the business partner of Nonny. He jumped into the next plane from New York to basically step in for Nonny. So James, thank you so much for that, and it's your show.
Okay, thank you so much. I've got my mind on. I've got this one. Okay. So I just want to say 3 quick things before we get started. I don't want to bore you with the civil servants, you borrow your lines. So, first of all, on behalf of me and my fellow panelists, we feel very lucky to have an entire day devoted to exploring this very emerging medium or genre of virtual reality. I think it is the next big thing. I think it's the fastest growing nexus of media and technology right now. It certainly feels that way in the States. On the other hand, we're still very much making it up as we go along, and I think you will hear that from some of our speakers today. So it's going to be big, but right now we're still figuring it out. But I think it shows great prescience and a great openness to innovation on the part of DocFest and a forum to dedicate an entire day to this. So I want to say thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Number 2, I'm very thankful. And again, my partner Nonny put this day together, so I take no credit for this. But when I look at the cross-section and the range of expertise that we have available to talk today, it's amazing. Okay, we have some very distinguished veterans across all media, from film and television and music and journalism, who are now working in VR. So they bring a great sense of perspective and context. So you're going to really get some context on what it is based on people who've really made their name already in existing media. And we also have some people who have kind of grown up in VR and what I think of as real natives to it, and they really see it from the inside. So I don't think you could ask for a better range of expertise than what you're going to see today. Okay, I think we have a really good lineup in that sense. And thirdly and finally, we'd like this to be a day about learning and finding out, right? It's not just about listening to a bunch of us talk to you. We're here to share what we know, but you're the people that are going to help us figure out how this stuff works. So please, I encourage you to ask questions. There are no bad questions. We really want to, make this be an interaction. And equally importantly, we have some very cool demonstrations set up out in the lobby. So during the lunch break and at the end of the sessions, please, I encourage you all to come out, put on the headsets, and try it. And I say this every time I give this talk or give this presentation, it sounds a little sort of too good to be true. You can't really describe it or explain it until you experience it for yourself. It's just one of those things you have to try. So please, at some point, give it a try. And that's it. Okay. Okay. So, I'm not Nonny. I am a co-founder with Nonny of a company called Emblematic Group, and that's a group that is dedicated to producing news and non-fiction content in virtual reality. So we think this is a new and a very powerful tool of telling certain kinds of news and non-fiction stories. Nonny's not here, but I'm going to kick off with a video of her, which I think is very relevant to some of the points I'm going to make today. If we have some sound.
L'agost.
From Los Angeles, California.
Welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguda a Barcelona. I don't know, Nonny, if I could ask you to raise your arms. A veure si pot aixecar els braços. Ja veieu que els aixeca. Keep them up, because now we'll show the robot. I ara anirem a veure el robot, que ja veieu. Can you move them a little bit more? A veure si els pot moure una mica més. Up and down. Doncs ja veieu que el robot reacciona perfectament amb la Nonny. Nonny, I'm ready to interview you now for a few minutes. Li farem una entrevista a la Nonny per veure què li ha semblat aquesta experiència. You're a journalist, ella és una periodista, i fa una estona ha entrevistat un científic de Barcelona. You just interviewed a researcher from Barcelona, but in a body of a robot. What was that experience like?
So for me, it starts to feel very natural after a while. Occasionally, there's some problems with the eye movement in my head if I move too fast. But beyond that, very quickly, I'm there in Barcelona with you.
So, I'm there. I'm there. She could have sent the robot today. It didn't have to be me. You know, we could have done the whole thing with the robot, but here I am. I'm there in Barcelona with you, and that gets to the very heart of what we're trying to do. Okay, we combine. It's a transmedia genre. We combine elements from several existing media, from documentary filmmaking, from journalism, and from video gaming. Put them together with the goal of trying to make you, the viewer, feel like you're really present at the scene, at the story that we're telling. And that's really what defines the entire thing. And we'll hear a lot more about that notion of presence as we go forward. So, we're pulling from a bunch of existing media. We consider ourselves primarily journalists, okay? We find stories, we report those stories, we gather footage, audio and video, the same way as you would if you were a documentary filmmaker. But we also borrow technology and platforms from the video gaming industry and from the motion picture industry for computer-generated images. So, you know, industries that are about creating virtual worlds, right? And we tell the real stories via that kind of virtual world. And here's what it's all about, the sense of presence. Forgive me, you're going to hear a lot about this today. You're going to hear some positive things about it and some skeptical things about it, but this is really the whole notion on which virtual reality exists. The way in which your mind or your brain can literally trick you into feeling you're somewhere else. And it's a dual thing. On some level you know that you're not, you know that you're really in a room in Munich or in New York, but part of you really believes that you're on scene. And that presence, which we also call embodiment, because it's a physical sensation, triggers a very strong emotional response. And this, I think, is one of the defining factors of VR at this point. It creates a really visceral, punch-in-the-gut kind of experience. Very powerful, and we have to use it very carefully. But it's that emotional response that we're looking for. Okay. In journalistic terms, nothing new about what we're trying to do, right? It's a classic journalistic tradition to try and make you feel like you're there. The legendary World War II journalist Martha Gellhorn used to call it the view from the ground, just with her writing, making you feel like you're present on the battlefield. And forgive me, but if you needed a reminder of how cheesy mainstream American media can be, the godfather of US TV news, Walter Cronkite, had a series of TV films called You Are There, and that was the explicit premise of these. I'll give you a little clip here.
Province is part of the Mexican nation, but their difficulties with the central government have steadily increased. Now there is open rebellion.
March 5th, 1836. The siege of the Alamo. You are there.
You better believe it. So, yeah, it's an old tradition. Hopefully we're doing it with a little more sophistication now. Now, again, to some people it seems a very weird response right away. You're using like video games to do news, but there is actually a tradition within video gaming, an alternative tradition, of using games to address historical or political issues. I'll give you a couple of examples here. There's a game called JFK Reloaded, which essentially recreates the assassination of JFK and puts you in the position of the shooter. Can you find the right angle where you could have delivered that fatal shot? So it's kind of a historical educational tool. Yes, in the presidential campaign between John Kerry and George Bush, there was a right-wing group that kind of cast aspersions on whether Kerry really deserved to have earned a medal in Vietnam. And this game was put out by a video gaming team to reenact the experience and see the reality of what it was really like. And thirdly, with this notion of presence. And again, we're going to hear, I don't want to go too much because we're going to hear a lot of stuff today about the pros and cons of this, but there is an entire academic field that studies this phenomenon, that are the underpinnings of what we do. The team of neuroscientists at the University of Barcelona, Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives, and they've coined this term, they call it RAIR, response as if real, right? You behave as if you were really there. And this is sort of a slightly scary-looking still of a study from 2007. What was going on here was the gentleman seated is wearing HMD, head-mounted display goggles, so he can see what's being shot by the camera behind him. And at some point, the researcher brings down a hammer in front of the camera, and of course, the man with the goggles flinches because he thinks it's coming to him. In some ways, this is ancient stuff, okay? It's a little bit like the Lumiere brothers and their film of the train coming into the station and everyone getting up and running out of the cinema, but it's a whole new, more immersive, more sophisticated take on that phenomenon. Okay, so I'm going to run you quickly through a series of the pieces that our company has made doing news or doing journalism in VR, to give you a sense of the context and the history. The first piece actually was pre-VR. This was built in Second Life, right? The virtual online community that started in 2003. And this came out of Nonny's history as an investigative reporter, and it was about the US prison in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And this was actually kind of a great experiment to try and build a virtual recreation of, because nobody knew what it was like. It was top secret. It was basically illegal in many ways. It was off limits to pretty much everyone, certainly no press. So Nonny tried to take this place that was completely off limits and create some kind of simulacrum of it that could actually be informational and educational and give people a sense of what it was like. And she succeeded. Here was a place that was, nobody could get to. But in Second Life, she literally had teams of school children would come with their teachers to tour around it and hear about it and find out about it. There was very little to go on, right? But we did try to use balanced sources to build this simulation. There were images smuggled out by a US soldier who kind of turned whistleblower. And there were also accounts by some of the first detainees who were released who gave accounts of what the experience was like. So we tried to model the environment roughly based on what those pictures were like. And I'll give you a little clip here of what the experience was like to be inside it. Again,
of a C-17 transport plane, and
you're immediately bound, and then a black hood comes over the vision of your avatar.
Shut up!
We then integrated some sounds that were based on descriptions of what real detainees heard. When the black hood is removed, you find that you're in a cage. Most of the footage is from original Defense Department shots of detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
a replica of Camp Delta.
So to give you a sense of that, so this led to an interest in one of the very controversial topics. Obviously, at the time of the US was basically using torture to get information from detainees, and one of the key methods being used was these stress positions. And we knew from detainee descriptions that it sort of involved having your hands down behind your back and having to either sort of stand up against the wall or sit down against the wall for hours on end. I mean, incredibly sort of painful and uncomfortable. And again, nobody knew what it looked like. There was no kind of documentary evidence of what it looked like or what it felt like. So this was the very first piece that Nonny created using a head-mounted display, what we now call goggles, to try and give you some sense of what that experience was. And here is also, we're trying to do journalism in VR, right? But there are really it's new. There are no standards or best practices, really. We're going to hear later from Zilla from the BBC, who I think will talk a little bit about that. But we're trying to walk a very fine line between making things up and being true to the evidence and the testimony that we have. So one of the things described in the witness's testimony was that through the wall, in a very muffled kind of way, they could hear soldiers shouting, sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up. So we faked that. We hired an actor to record that, and with a muffled microphone. So we kind of recreated that piece of the experience. And I can give you a audio, please, a little sense of that.
If this is uncomfortable,
So, and just one very important takeaway here. So everyone who went through this piece was seated straight up, okay, with the equipment. And when we asked each of them afterwards, what position were you in during the experience, every single one reported that they'd been bent over forwards because they'd seen themselves reflected in that mirror, and this is the power of presence, right? They felt like they'd been in a different physical situation to what they actually were. I'm going to just skip the next clip a little bit because not long after we made this, a video was released of prisoners in Iraq of the British Army, and it basically was very similar to the description that we created. I'll give you a couple of seconds of this. It's long, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it is essentially the same experience. And the guy starts getting, sit down, stand up. Anyway, okay, so the next project was much closer to home. Nonny works out of the University of Southern California, and USC did a big project called Hunger in the Golden State, which was designed to try and raise public awareness about the number of people in California who live below the poverty line, don't have enough to eat. And she wanted to do a piece about what we call a food bank in downtown Los Angeles, where basically you go, you queue up for food handouts. And the idea was to do it with, take still images and to use CGI to recreate the people in the line, but also actually for the first time to have actual real audio of the actual event. As it happens, when the sound engineer was there recording, a man waiting in the line was diabetic, had a seizure, he collapsed, it was a very dramatic incident, the ambulance had to come, and all this was captured in the sound. So on the left you see the real line, on the right the CGI recreations. I want to take a pause there because I've given this talk so many times, and to some people it's still very weird that we're using these, what look like these animated cartoon characters to tell these real stories. Early on, it was partly for budget reasons. Okay, this was made for pretty much zero budget, but put on a volunteer basis by Nonny, and other academics and students at the university basically chipped in and created these human animations to people the scene. This was 6 years ago now, so we're way advanced now. I'm just getting a sense of the history and the context there. Now, this was the first piece. This is very emblematic of the pieces that we make, in that we tend to create installations, right? So we have a 20 by 20 foot space with motion capture cameras around the edge of the space. You'll see some of those later. And we make our own goggles, which have antennae on them so that you're tracked as you move around. So the environment reacts to your movements. And for us, this makes it what we call a more fully immersive experience. You really feel like you're there. And again, the degrees of immersion we're going to hear about later as we go through the day. It's one of the key elements of VR. So I'm going to play you a clip from this piece showing as if you're walking around inside the experience. But at some point, an inset video comes in on the right and shows you how people react as they're inside the experience. The audio for this one.
Okay, he's having a seizure. Okay.
Please, is falling down right now.
So you can see, actually, that's not just anyone. That's actually the director, Alejandro González Iñárritu. He came to the lab in LA. He was one of the first people to see this piece. But this is one of the strange things about it. When you're inside that experience, you could easily walk through those people, like a ghost. There's nothing to stop you going directly through. But I've seen hardly anyone do that. When you're there, you kind of believe that you're there, and you're very careful to walk around people and step down. And again, back to this sense of presence and of the emotional response. So many people actually get down on their knees. They want to help the guy that's collapsed. Okay, there's this very powerful feeling that you're there and you want to do something. And this was, we showed this at the Sundance Festival. We saw this reaction again and again. And just the last clip in terms of the emotional response that we get.
What'd you think? Oh, you're crying. You're crying. Gina, you're crying. Oh.
So it's we know that we have a very powerful tool, and again, be very careful to use it responsibly. So that piece was shown at that was the first piece of virtual reality programming to be shown at the Sundance Film Festival, 2012. That was a very historic moment for us, and it led to the commissioning of our next big piece, which is called Use of Force, and this was at the Tribeca Film Festival, 2014. And again, this was a pretty heavy-duty investigative news piece about another pretty tragic story. This is Anastasio Hernandez Rojas. He was an undocumented Mexican immigrant in the U.S. He lived there for 20 years, had a family, held a job most of that time. He fell on hard times. He was caught doing a petty crime, shoplifting, sent back across the border. He tried to get back into the States. He was stopped by border guards and beaten. He went to complain to the guards' supervisor about the beating, and the supervisor responded by sending him back to the guards for another beating. He was severely beaten by about 10 border guards, and he ended up dying from his injuries. So we were trying to raise awareness about this case. Still, no one's been charged in this case, so in that sense, we have not yet succeeded, but the driving factor was to try and, how can we bring this story to light in a way that really makes you feel, how terrible it was and what an important story it is. So we're starting now to incorporate some new elements into this hybrid genre, right? The brick that mixes and matches from different media. This is the first piece mainly based on user-generated content. So we only had 2 pieces of material on which to base this, right? There were many witnesses, but 2 of them used their cell phones. So there was one guy on the ground level who sort of filmed through the railings and got a very blurry take of sort of what was going on. But then there was a woman up on the balcony level, and she had a bird's eye view, and she could see really the horrible thing that was happening. But her phone, we've all experienced this, was running out of power. So she had 60 seconds to record. So we had these 2 bits of footage, and again, I say we. Nonny had the idea to stitch them, to combine them together to create an interactive experience. And this may seem strange to want to introduce a gaming element into the experience, but the idea was, okay, to help bring home the reality of the event, that we also would give you a cell phone as you walked through the installation, and you were given 60 seconds. Like, if you were a witness and you had to capture the most important piece of evidence that would help, close this case, which bit are you going to shoot? So that was a way of making it more interactive and getting people more involved. And it's also the first time, and again, something you're going to hear more about later. This is one of the techniques that's really growing in this field. The first time that we used facial and body capture to take a real person and to recreate them using CGI. So this is a little bit of the raw footage from the guy that was on the ground. I'm not going to show you just a couple of seconds of this. The quality gets a little bit better, but it was very grainy. And you mostly hear the audio. Not too much of that. This was the view from up on the balcony, and this was the woman that captured that view. And we brought her up to the lab in LA and scanned her, and then created the facial and the body model. So that, and again, we're into some interesting journalistic territory here because in a way it's kind of a dramatic reenactment, right? Nonny brought her to the lab, and she basically said to her, "Do what you did on that night, right? Make the same movements, have the same reactions. We're going to try and recapture you." So it's a borderline area for journalism. If the New York Times were taking a photograph and they would say to someone, "Oh, you know what? Can you get into a better position so that makes a better photograph?" That's questionable. But we're having to kind of make up these techniques as we go and figure out the best practices. We're just trying to, again, to be as true to the story as we can and to tell it as strongly as we can. So again, the view from above, so many people who came through, and this is at the Tribeca Festival last year in New York. You're in downtown New York on Varick Street. You're in a regular room with walls and a floor and a ceiling. You put on the goggles, and you see them come up to the edge of the balcony, peer over like this because you don't want to fall over. Again, a reminder of how strongly you feel that you're physically present in the scene. Everyone, we took a picture of every single person, and they all have the same thing. They sort of creep up to the edge and lean over. Okay, so this is a bit of a long clip, but for a very good reason. Because again, we're talking about putting this into a journalistic context. So we took this to the American website BuzzFeed, because they heard about it, they were very interested about it, and again, we're trying to raise public awareness and spread the word about it as much as we can. So we set this up at their headquarters and had a bunch of journalists walk through the piece and talk about what they expected to get from this piece of virtual reality, and then what their reactions were afterwards. So we kind of intercut that with what you see while you're inside the piece. I think it's very illustrative of how this works in that context. So audio, please, and we're going to go.
I don't even know what these are. I guess cameras?
Looks like somebody's gonna shock me.
That guy's holding a lightsaber back there. I think virtual reality really is like the next big thing. I think it's the new video game or whatever that means.
It's so weird. There's like all these people and I'm like, what is about to happen?
How's this look with my hair? Pretty good, right?
Oh, got it. Whoa!
This is going to simulate a cell phone, so it's going to be when you press this button here, and you hold it up in front of you, a cell phone will appear, and you'll have 60 seconds to record whatever you want before your battery dies.
Oh, I see. Oh my god. That's even crazier.
All right, so there's a bunch of cops here. They're like standing around, something's going on.
Oh, right here. That's not cool.
Like on the other side of a fence, there's all these people just like kicking and beating this man, and he's screaming.
Look at this, and nobody's doing anything about it. Of course nobody's doing anything about it, right? Of course, because that's what people do, they just watch. It's kind of messed up.
Oh, here we go.
I couldn't tell before, but I think he's handcuffed.
I'm looking above. I'm seeing the horror.
Hey, we're recording you.
Already not moving, but there's like 5 dudes beating him.
Same thing, they just are not stopping. I don't know, I mean, I can't believe that like is real.
Did not expect a recreation of a real life beating.
I thought it was going to be some sort of, possibly some, entertaining game. That was not the case.
You feel kind of like helpless and isolated.
Hopefully in that situation you actually would be able to like somehow stop it, but I do think like the next best thing is recording it.
Yeah, I wonder what I would really do. Like, I know you want to say stuff, it's okay to say stuff, but it's like, I don't have the power to go and arrest the police. Maybe that's problematic.
I think when you see something like that, you're like, wow, that was horrible, but at least like the one comfort that I have is like the United States justice system will do something about it, and like people that do bad things get punished for that. And then like what we've been seeing the past few weeks is like sometimes that doesn't happen.
The thing that was really sort of disorienting is that it wasn't one cop doing it and his partner, it was all these other cops sort of standing around and watching.
I think every police officer in the United States probably needs to experience what I just experienced.
I think everyone should give this a shot.
And it should not only be for entertainment. I think there should be a whole universe of stuff that we can use this for. And this is definitely something I didn't consider at all. And it's really effective.
So, hopefully an interesting perspective there from journalists working through the piece and giving some insight into what we're trying to do. So that led to our next and probably biggest commission to date, which was from the World Economic Forum. And they wanted a piece to raise awareness about the civil war in Syria. This was commissioned to show at Davos in 2014. And again, like I said, we're making this up as we go along. So we respond to different stories in different ways. We see new technologies becoming available all the time. And again, you're going to hear more about some of that later today. And each project for us is a chance to expand the nature of the medium and how we can tell these stories. So this was the first one that used chapters, like a multi-part narrative. It began again with a piece of existing kind of found footage of an explosion on the streets in Aleppo, which had been seen a lot on YouTube. It was already pretty well-known material, but we turned it into an immersive virtual reality experience. For the first time, we had a budget to actually send a documentary crew to the border with Iraq to film a refugee camp, and you get a sense of what that looked like to be there. And we were able to do multiple facial scans to have more people in there to make a more realistic environment. Here are some of those that we did, and just a very brief. And this is the opening scene of the explosion. And we have to be very careful when these are mostly very curated experiences for us. Again, we set up these installations at events and festivals and places around the world. So everyone that we bring in, we say to them beforehand, here's what you're about to experience, give them a sense of it. If you're going to find that too shocking, you shouldn't do it. So, just to give you a sense of the context of that, but this was the trailer for this piece. And here we flip between the real original video and then the recreation of it that you did. You'll see it notated down the side of the screen. So, and again, we had an amazing response to this at Davos. World leaders, business leaders, a lot of people came through and were very, very sort of moved and impressed. We do find people have strong responses to these pieces, and I keep saying you kind of have to experience it to really understand it. It's not doing it at all justice to see it on screen like this. But you see pinned up in the back there the notes that people leave because everyone who sees it feels they want to leave some response to it. We were invited shortly after this to put the piece up in London at the Victoria and Albert Museum. And this was completely off the cuff. One of the curators had seen it and said, "This is amazing, it's so powerful, we must give you a space to show it in London." There was no marketing, there was no advertisement whatsoever. It just was there for 3 days. If you happened to be in the museum, you saw this thing, maybe you tried it out. And in the course of those 3 days, we had 54 pages of comments in the guest book. Because, again, people were so impressed and moved as they went through. And my favorite one here on this page, a powerful tool to create awareness of a great ill in the world. So, that's kind of what we're aiming for. Okay, so nearly there. I'm bringing you up to speed now on pretty much current events with our most recent project and one that's just in development. So, yes, up until now, everything we've done was using our own custom hardware in an installation that we have to set up. We wanted to do a piece that would be more widely available because the hardware to see VR is becoming more ubiquitous. The Gartner Group predicted that by 2018 there'll be 25 million pairs of goggles will have been sold. So this is very rapidly becoming a mass medium. We're not there yet, for sure, and you'll see that as you try things outside, but it's happening very fast. So, and we want our stuff to be seen by as many people as possible. So we wanted to make this piece about the Trayvon Martin case in Florida for a couple of reasons. First, to prove to ourselves we could build something really sort of much faster and lighter. It took a couple of weeks to build with a couple of people, and that it could enjoy wider distribution and be seen by more people. So this piece is made available to be seen on the Samsung Gear VR and on the Google Cardboard goggles. It was shown at Tribeca just 3 weeks ago in this year. And again, also an idea of how the medium is developing, and you're going to hear much more about this later from some of the other speakers. But this is put together using almost entirely found elements, right? The driving piece of this, footage for this piece is tapes of the calls made to police, 911 calls. So you hear the actual audio all the way through of how those calls were actually recorded. And it starts with George Zimmerman, who was the Neighborhood Watch volunteer who shot and killed Trayvon, in his car, spots him in the housing complex, calls the police, the whole back and forth. And the police say, "Don't follow him." And of course, he gets out the car to follow him. He does anyway. But even the rendering of the environment, the housing complex, all that material is now available, pretty much open source or for very little money, on the web. We're reaching a plug and play situation where you can build these pieces with very little. So, for example, this is a picture of the Twin Lakes condominium complex where the events happened, the exterior and the interiors. And here are 3D architectural renderings of that complex, which are open source, available on the web for anyone to download. Interiors also. And the car in which George Zimmerman was sitting, here's a site where for a couple of $100, you can download a 3D rendering of any type of automobile and incorporate it into your platform. So again, the idea was, are we going to get to a point where we can create VR pieces fast enough that they can become part of the news cycle, right? I don't think it's ever going to be for breaking news, because obviously it's a whole extra level of production, just capturing something right away. But if there is an element to this story that can be better told in VR than in any other medium, and we're not sure what that is yet, but we believe that there is a specific niche that VR does better than anything else, we need to be able to do it fast enough that it becomes part of the news cycle, of how we find out about and respond to any particular breaking event. I'm not going to show you a lot of this, because I've showed a lot of clips. I think we're getting to the end here. I'm running out of time. So maybe it looks a little dark, but if we can get some audio, I'm just going to show you. Can we turn down the light, I think, somebody else, so we can see it a bit better?
Something's wrong with it. He's coming to check me out. He's got something in his hands. I don't know what his deal is. Sounds good. Let me know if he does anything else. Yeah, we got him on the line. Just let me know if this guy does anything else. Okay. These assholes, they always get away. Yeah. When you come to the clubhouse, you come straight in. Don't turn and make a left. Shit, he's running. He's running. Which way is he running? Down towards the entrance of the neighborhood. Okay. What entrance is that that he's heading for? The back entrance. Are you following him? Yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that. Okay.
Do you need police or medical? Maybe both. I'm not sure. There's just someone screaming out.
Okay, so then we go through all the various other calls that were called in from residents in the complex because they'd heard a commotion and then when they heard gunshots. So the entire thing follows the actual, the real-time unfolding of events, and it's real audio all the way through, even though the rest is built in CGI. So that's pretty much it. I'm just going to hear a little bit about the current project that we're in the works with. This is a big commission we just got from Al Jazeera America. They have a really excellent documentary series they make called Fault Lines, and they're covering some tough topics that no one else in mainstream American media is covering. This one's about domestic violence in South Carolina. It's going to debut at TED Women May 27th. So Nonny's giving that talk, and the whole thing is sponsored by Google. And they're going to give out the Google Cardboard goggles to everyone who comes. So again, a great way to launch that piece. Very quickly, it involves an incident of domestic violence, homicide. Up top, you see the actual picture of the actual house where it took place, and below the recreation. So you can see the recreations are getting more and more realistic and convincing, and we're better able to sketch them out with more depth and realism. So, it's essentially what we do. We use techniques borrowed and kind of mashed together from a bunch of media, documentary filmmaking, journalism, film, to put them together into this crazy hybrid that makes you feel like you're there, okay? It really makes you feel present at the scene, and by doing that, we think generates a stronger emotional response, and conveys the importance of the story in a way that that's unique, I think, to this medium. And that's basically it. Thank you. So now, in my dual role of presenter and moderator, I have to ask if anyone wants to ask me a question. So please. And we do want to hear, this is, like I said, we're figuring this out as we go along. You're going to help us work out what it is as much as we are. Yes, please, yep.
Can you wait for the microphone?
Oh, sorry, okay, wait for the microphone, here it comes.
First of all, I have to say it's really impressive with your company, since you're real pioneers actually of virtual reality. You are doing it now since already, what is it? What it probably
Thank you, but it's not me, it's all Nonny. But
well,
she's been doing it for 8 years.
Company.
Yeah, I mean, she's been doing it
8 years,
since, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
so since 2007
yeah.
actually. So what's very impressive is that you've not only developed all the hardware behind it, but also you're pioneers in the actual storytelling, or also in regards to the software. What do you think to the recent developments in the new technology, and what has just happened in the past, let's say 12 months, regarding HTC Valve on the one hand, and also Chris Milk when it comes to live action 3D, 360 3D, in terms of when it comes to the immersion, but also in terms of technology.
Yeah. So I think the whole issue of 360-degree video sort of versus CGI, which is what we're doing, is going to be a major theme of today. And there are other people here today who can answer this one much better than I can. Chris Milk stuff is great. I've seen all of those pieces, of course. I'll say this. I don't believe that by definition, when you can see these scenes in actual video as opposed to recreated in CG, that it's more believable or more realistic or more compelling. I think there's a very specific way to tell stories in VR. And actually, I think that audio strangely, to me, is the most emotionally evocative piece of the whole thing. It goes straight into the brain in a different kind of way. I sometimes make the comparison to photorealism in art, which is this movement in the 80s where New York school, where people would make paintings that they looked like photographs from a distance, so that we're getting photorealism. That wasn't the end of art. There's art keeps finding different ways to move you and to tell stories. So 360 is going to make great strides. We have a presentation coming up later on what's good about it, but also some of the drawbacks with it. I don't think it necessarily tells a more realistic, compelling story. But you know what? Like I said, we're at the very early days. Each of these things is going to evolve in its own way. So we'll see what happens with that one. And again, other people know that one much better than I do, and they will speak later. Yes.
A fascinating presentation, thanks. So it's a similar and related question because, say for example, in 0 Point, which I imagine you've seen the live action video, there's a checkpoint in there, filmed in 360, which gives you a real sense of presence. And yes, I can see there's an argument where images don't necessarily have to be photoreal if you're creating them in CG to give you a sense of experience. And yet, sort of towards the end of your presentation, you were indicating you were travelling towards, your direction of travel was towards more photoreal CGI. So it seems to me that surely if that is the direction of travel, then live action is ultimately the most, give you a greater sense of presence.
Yeah, actually, I misspoke a little bit when I said realism there. And again, part of the reason we made the Trayvon piece, right? We were wanting to be very aware of the specifics and the limitations of each device, right? So making a piece that we knew would be seen on Google Cardboard. One of the reasons that guided Nonny to choose this particular event was it was a dark and rainy night, so visibility was very limited. So the processing power of the phone was not going to be asked to render super detailed, realistic environments. I don't know that it's more realism that we're stretching towards. Again, I think that the challenges are, and again, this was very illustrative as we went through the process with Al Jazeera, right? Because that was the first time we partnered with a major news company that had much bigger resources than we do, and a ton of reporters, and feet on the ground to sort of, and also major troves of footage to work, of video footage. And the immediate first response on the part of all their journalists and editors was, wow, we have this amazing footage of, this scene in Ferguson when the police actually tear-gassed us, the reporters, and da-da-da. And it was a very kind of illustrative learning experience to go through with them and say, actually, no, that's not going to be the most compelling piece of VR, right? There are all kinds of other factors that come into play, like how many... Nonny likes to use the term spatial narrative, right? So what is it about this story that makes me understand it better because I'm inside it and I can understand the physical dimensions involved in the relations between people? So conveying that, I think, is much more important than the figures that are next to me are, shot in video realism or not. I think that's kind of secondary. And actually, and I'm not the expert here, I think Zillow, who's going to speak later, knows more than I do. There's a study coming out from Stanford soon that talks about all the various factors that play into the level of presence, and realism of the visuals actually ranks pretty low, and much higher up actually is the response lag time of whichever gear you happen to be using, and I feel to be very true of myself. I'm a relative newcomer here. I've only been doing this for a year. Obviously, Nonny's been doing it much longer. And I was very skeptical coming in. I started out. I'm a magazine journalist originally. I'm believe in the power of words still over a lot of other media. But going through a bunch of these pieces as I now have, ranging from the fully immersive, whether it's the Vive or our hand-built headsets, all the way through to the cardboard, to see the very direct correlation between the sophistication and the processing power of the technology and the emotional impact of the content, it's crystal clear. And I kind of hate to say that. I kind of hate to admit that I'm going to allow myself to be so influenced by the technology over and above just the concept of the story, but I think it's absolutely true. Anyone else? Back here.
Hello. I think the advantage of your system using something like a game engine is that the person can move, obviously, in space, which is not possible if I capture it. Then you have one point of view, unless you do a true 3D capture and not just a stereoscopic capture. And that's going to be a long time, I think. And are you thinking about having more interaction possibilities within the scene? But because right now I basically am just an observer, and maybe, I don't know, I can see my body or these kind of things, which would also be impossible if I just capture it with real cameras. Is there something you're looking for, like actually maybe having conversations or having a more game approach to it?
Yep. So yes, right now all you can do is to go inside the experience and move around. Yep, you're on your own in there. So I think we're pushing out on multiple fronts. One would be to be able to be inside that experience with other people, so and be aware of other real people in there with you, interacting with the elements of the installation. But news-wise, I'm not sure. I think if it's a news story, again, it's more about if it's an issue that can be most effectively communicated by showing you the spatial elements of what actually happened, then I'm not sure, where we add the interaction in there. But to give you a sort of completely out of the ballpark response, we also we mostly do what we call the hard news, because we're also a growing company and we have to make money somehow and in some other ways. So we also create some more entertainment-based experiences. For example, for Standard Chartered Bank last year, we went to the Singapore Grand Prix and recreated the experience of being inside a car, driving the track. They've asked us back this year to do that again. And so this year we're going to have two people racing against each other in the environment. That's a much, it's a much obvious, easier example in a gaming environment because yes, it's about competition and having multiple players. In terms of the news pieces, I'm not sure where that's going to go. I mean, we had with use of force, we had the interactivity of the camera to get the 60 seconds. Again, I think it's very much case by case. Each, and again, which brings me back to the 360 thing. Like, I don't think the future is just that, every time you shoot video footage of some situation, you'll also capture a 360 video of the same thing, so you can also see it from every angle. Because in a lot of situations, that doesn't really add very much. It doesn't really help you very much. And I think the one thing I've learned from following Nonny through this is that it's really case by case. And each story is unique, and each one may suggest its own way in which introducing some kind of interaction helps convey the importance of the story. I think that's basically it. Anyone else? Okay. How are we doing for time? I think we're doing okay. I guess I'm the moderator, so it's up to me, right? So I think we're fine. Okay. Thank you very much. We're now going to move along to our next speakers, which is going to be really cool and very interesting. Coming up next, we have Zilla Watson and Peter Boyd McLean. And I said earlier, when I was in the opening remarks, about how we have people who have really distinguished careers in other media who are now bringing a new perspective to this emerging genre. I couldn't think of two better examples than Zilla and Peter. Zilla has been a current affairs producer. She leads future content and storytelling projects for BBC Research and Development. So someone who's very much attached to one of the biggest, best-known media organizations in the world, and helping a big company like that figure out how to make sense of and how to move forward in this emerging media. She's working on VR and immersive journalism projects, curating web content, developing web-native ways to navigate dramas and soaps, and figuring out interactive storytelling. She recently produced and curated Alistair Cook's Letter from America archive for the BBC Radio 4, which was nominated for a Sony Award. And she was head of editorial standards for Radio 4 for 5 years. So I think Zilla's in a unique, amazing position here because she's, again, comes from some of these very big media organizations and knows some of the, both the power and the restrictions that come with being in a very responsible organization like that that's held to the very, very highest standards of editorial integrity, and trying to convert some of that thinking into this, very, very emerging, more fluid genre, I think gives her a really unique perspective. So we're really looking forward to hearing what she's going to say. Coming up with Zilla is Peter Boyd McLean, another veteran from different media. Peter graduated from St. Martin's School of Art in 1986. He studied fine art film. While he was there, he formed the Duvet Brothers. They were pioneers of what was the genre known as scratch video. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. He made some really amazing, innovative music videos, including the #1 hit, Pump Up the Volume. He directed the stop-motion animation series, Crapston Villas, for Channel 4, and The PJs, starring Eddie Murphy, for Fox USA. He's directed short films, including The Boot, a black comedy, an official selection for the Venice Film Festival. He's worked as a television series director of scripted comedy, documentaries, and factual entertainment programs for the Discovery Channel, BBC, ITV, and Channel 4. So Peter's done it all. He knows about directing, he knows about editing, not just knows about it, he was a real innovator in those media, within those media, right? So he really pioneered super fast cut editing. I think he's always been pushing whichever technology he's worked with to the limit, and really trying almost to break it. How far can I shake it till I break it? So again, very curious to see what he's going to bring to this medium, which is as crazy and maverick in its nature as he is himself as an individual. So with that, please welcome Zilla and Peter up to the stage.